And finally, use the letter to select one item from this list. And finally, use the letter to select one item from this list. Oh my, you're way off track. In fact, I don't think you got any of those right. We can't be making wild guesses here. I mean, you could be levelling serious accusations against an innocent person. I'd best look at some of your evidence. Please turn in 4 cards to the evidence room. That's right, 4 cards. In all fairness, you are onto something, or should I say one thing. In fact, my theory and yours only agree in one place. You got 1 of the 4 guesses right. Since you are having some trouble, I'm going to look at your notes. Please turn in 3 cards to the evidence room. Although you're getting close, I'm afraid you're only halfway there. According to my theory, you only got 2 out of the 4 correct. In order to help along the investigation, why don't you turn in 2 cards to the evidence room? I like your thinking. In fact, I'd say that you got 3 of those correct. If only you can get the last fact straight, you'll solve the case. In the meantime, please turn in 1 card to the evidence room. This way, I can help you see where you may have gone awry. By George, you've done it! You've solved the case! Well done indeed! Now, a good detective knows how to keep track of his evidence, and you've shown tracking skills in spades. Spot on, I say. Body, of course, had one of his souvenirs from Monte Carlo stolen. With that information, you could eliminate the medal given to him by his uncle, the pocket watch which was being fixed, all of the desk items which he purchased in London, and the revolver which went off this morning. Body discovered the theft before sundown, which eliminated dinner, night, and midnight. And of course, the most incriminating clue of all, White reported that the key to the display cases was missing from the kitchen, and Azure, Rusty, Plum, and Green were all seen slinking out of there before breakfast. Only a matter of time before your expertise solved the case. You've done it! You've solved the case! Bully for you for figuring it all out. Mr. Body lent Lady Lavender one of his valuable pieces of jewellery, in this case, the scarab brooch. The butler noticed that the two guests who arrived with Lavender, Mrs. Meadowbrook and Colonel Mustard, took an interest in the brooch too. As we now know, one of them took a very, very special interest in that brooch. When Lavender left her jacket on the back of her chair in the dining room, Mustard jumped at the opportunity and stole the jewellery. But now, thanks to your expert sleuthing, you've caught him. Bravo! Well done, you've solved the case. And to think that it was Lady Lavender all along. There were key clues, of course, and you did a remarkable job piecing them together. The party didn't start until after lunch, so you knew you could eliminate dawn, breakfast, and late morning. The men were tied up playing poker from tea time until midnight, so if the theft happened after tea time, it had to be a woman who did it. The theft didn't occur in a room that a game was played in, which eliminates the billiard room, kitchen, lounge, rose garden and dining room, as well as lunch and dinner when all the guests were together playing charades. Finally, you knew the gold pen, spyglass, medal and billfold were all locked up or accounted for. Your deductions paid off. Good show! You've broken this case wide open. It was very clever how you put together all the pieces of the puzzle. Someone was unhappy at breakfast. Mrs. Meadowbrook left breakfast with a glass of juice. Then Mrs. White found the broken glass in the north wing. It all points to the poor Meadowbrook. She'd become upset listening to the men discuss the hunt. So upset that she thought her only way out was to steal the revolver and stop the hunt from happening. But you put the clues together and solved the case. Well done! Hurrah and toodle-pip! You've cracked the case. Ingenious how you figured it all out too. Plum, of course, was enamoured with Mr. Body's rare book. A few choice passages which had really wet Plum's whistle for the expensive tome. Lady Lavender was upset because Professor Plum had stood her up for a date to stroll the grounds, at which time Plum was busy pilfering Body's book instead. He was the shadowy figure the butler had noticed near the conservatory. Of course, you realised that Mrs. White had overheard Plum saying he wanted Body's rare book, which she'd misheard as rare cook. A job well done. A fine example of police work if I ever saw one. Brilliant deductions all round. Poor misguided Professor Plum. He simply couldn't resist trying to steal the Christmas gifts locked away in the study. He was so desperate, he stole the letter opener to try to pick the study door's lock. When that didn't work, he tried the secret passage entrance in the kitchen. Since Mrs. White was busy making Christmas dinner and kept shooing him away, he had to cause a distraction. And what a mess he made of the dining room. With Rusty and White out of the kitchen helping the butler clean up, Plum was able to sneak into the study through the secret passage and steal the gifts. He smuggled them out of the kitchen window and hid them near the fountain. But thanks to you, that Ebenezer didn't ruin Christmas. Incredible! You've cracked this case wide open. As you know, Mr. Boddy lent his valuables to the guests to complete their costumes. Green went as a decorated soldier and borrowed the medal. Scarlet was an armed burglar and borrowed the revolver. Meadowbrook was a librarian and borrowed the rare book. And the two most important clues. Mustard went as a sea captain and Plum as a pharaoh. Mustard had borrowed the spyglass and Plum the scarab brooch. Once Plum had been found unconscious and the spyglass found in the secret passage with him with a plum-sized dent in it, it was obvious that Mustard had brained Plum and stolen the brooch, making his move at midnight after a group of them had gone outside to stargaze. Well done! Your skills of deduction are uncanny. Good show. Of course, the key to this case was knowing that the thief was not at the mansion for more than a few hours. That eliminated Plum, Green, Scarlet, and Meadowbrook, and cast serious suspicion on Lavender and Azure, who were only at the mansion briefly. Further clues pointed to the fact that the letter opener was with another desk item in the morning, but that it was by itself by midnight, again shining the spotlight on one of the other desk items as the purloined valuable. Finally, Mustard's comment that he saw someone in one of the north rooms immediately made the lounge, study, and hall the object of dubious distinction. Of course, we now know it was Lavender who walked off with a crystal paperweight from the hall at lunch, all thanks to you. Cracking detective work. Good show. I'm sure it wasn't easy with this storm raging outside, but you figured it all out. Knowing when the lights went out was an important clue because the theft happened when the mansion was dark. The first time the lights went out, the guests were all together in the conservatory. The second time, Plum spilled his soup, which of course meant it was dinner time. Since the third time the lights went out, everyone but Scarlet was asleep. That threw suspicion on midnight. Buddy was overheard arguing with a woman, who we now know was Mrs. White, refusing to give her the dangerous antique revolver. Poor Mrs. White was terrified by the storm, seeing danger in every shadow, driven by her fears to steal the revolver for protection. I see clear skies ahead now, but the thief has been caught. Bravo! Bravo! You've uncovered the theft of Mr. Body's medal, by none other than Prince Azure himself. Your deductions were spot on, since the theft occurred in a room that was one word and ended in the letter Y. You knew you could eliminate the billiard room, rose garden, ballroom, hall, kitchen, dining room, and lounge. You also knew that the crime took place during lunch or later, since all items were still accounted for by late morning. You further deduced that since the thief was with one of you yesterday, it had to be White, Azure, or Plum. Mr. Body and Scotland Yard owe you our deepest thanks. My goodness, you've done it! A tricky case, but you put the pieces together. Simply a matter of limiting your options. Take, for instance, the rooms. The conservatory was off limits, none of the valuables were outside, no one was in the north wing, and someone was seen lurking about the west wing. Not far to get to the library from there. As for when it happened, Azure ate lunch alone, which placed the crime sometime after that. In addition, the pocket watch, billfold, crystal paperweight, and all the antiques were accounted for. A little snooping closed the case. Miss Scarlet, flattered that she was being asked for an autograph, used the expensive gold pen in the library, then conveniently forgot to put it back. But you closed the curtain on that act. Well done and good show. Amazing! You solved the crime, and an incredibly difficult case to crack too. Knowing that the thief struck before he or she met with Mr. Body, of course, was an important lead. It meant that if the thief had been Mr. Green, the theft occurred before late morning. If the thief had been Mustard, it was before tea time. But, in fact, the thief was Scarlet, and she committed her larcenous act in the late morning. She had seen her mother meeting with Mr. Body, and had used the spyglass to look in on them. We now know that Scarlet picked up some limited lip-reading skills in her years on stage and was able to eavesdrop in on the conversation. Whatever was said upset Scarlet so much she nicked the spyglass there and then. Such a criminal impulse, but you flushed her out. Bravo and good show for you.